I don't know how to turn that into a question, though, so I'm going to move on to a question and say this. You've referred to lost beliefs about the apostles. Would you not at least agree that the pre-Pauline hymns that we have are the earliest, and as I presented, they proclaim Jesus as Yahweh, as you said in your debate with James White, and also you haven't touched any of the Markan evidence I gave. Would you at least not agree that Mark presents Jesus as Yahweh?
I wouldn't agree that either Paul or Jesus or Mark presents Jesus as Yahweh. Paul, despite what he says about Jesus and raising Jesus to a high status, which Muslims would not accept, but Paul stops short of making Jesus Yahweh. For example, 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 24 shows that in the final end game, Jesus is going to return all power to God who gave it to him in the first place, and Christ will be subjected to God, so that God will be all in all, which means that you do not have three co-equal co-eternal beings. You have God who is greatest and Jesus who is under God. That's why Paul could say in 1 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 3 that the head of every man is Christ and the head of Christ is God. Mark as well does not present Jesus as Yahweh, even though there are some passages which, as you mentioned, about preparing the way of the Lord, which might tease the boundaries a little bit, but that's different from Mark coming out and saying, oh, it looks like Jesus is actually Yahweh. Mark is actually very clear when he quotes Jesus in chapter 12, verse number 29, Jesus repeating the same Shema Israel, saying that there is only one God, the God of Israel. And then the man who asked Jesus about this said, you are right, teacher, there is only one God, and besides him there is no other. So the him is somebody else other than Jesus. And then Jesus praised the man for having such deep insight. So it's clear from Mark's gospel that Jesus is not Yahweh. Mark chapter 13 verse 32 shows that Jesus does not know when the hour will occur.